Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I am going to be doing for you my November wrap-up. So I actually had a pretty great reading month. I read 9 books this month, which is awesome. I was reading really quickly, and I really enjoyed almost every single book that I read. I had some issues with a couple at the end, but I enjoyed almost every single book I read. But the other thing is that technically November is not over yet when I'm filming this. I am filming this on Thanksgiving, which means, first of all, it smells amazing downstairs and it's killing me a little bit. I had a bite of some pumpkin bread earlier and I'm ready to eat some Thanksgiving dinner. But it also means that it is 4 days before the end of November, so this was pretty much one of the last chances I had to film before I leave next week. But it does mean that I might probably finish at least another book before the end of November, but hey, that'll just be included in the December wrap-up. So for now, we're just going to go over the 9 books that I read this month in the month of November. The only 2 books that I read that were not fantasy were both books for school, and they were both non-fiction books that were in some way about London. So first up, I'm going to talk about one of those, and that is Down and Out in Paris and London by George Orwell. This story is a non-fiction account of George Orwell's time when he was living as a very poor person in both Paris and in London. He wanted to get this really authentic experience and be able to write about what poverty meant from a personal point of view. And this book was really interesting, and I actually really liked it. I think that I might want my own copy of this book, to be honest with you, just because it was really fascinating. The only other book I've ever read by George Orwell is 1984, and I didn't actually love that book, so I was a bit nervous going into this, but it was really excellent. I love the way it was written. I think that he had a couple of friends that were just the most ridiculous of characters, but I think that this was a very interesting look into a very interesting time and a very cool way of looking at it. So this was a really great book, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Alright, now on to a bunch of fantasy books. So the first fantasy book that I read for the month was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This is the first book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. So I don't really know how to give a summary of this book because I feel like summaries of this book kind of give a little bit too much away, and I really liked going into this book not knowing a ton about it. So I just want to read to you like the first sentence of the book because I think that that explains all you need to know about the book. Alright, so it starts, "Once upon a time an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well." This book was really interesting, and my favorite part about it honestly was the writing. I think that the writing in this book was so incredible. A lot of it takes place in Prague, and so the descriptions are really beautiful, but I just love Laini Taylor's style of writing. I completely fell in love with it, and throughout the book, despite the fact that I had some really big issues with the way that the romance was written, and it kind of dragged for me in the middle of the book, the writing is what got it through because it was so strong. I had a bit of a hard time in the middle of the book, but I think that it really pulled it together at the end, and it was really interesting, and the world building was really fascinating and cool and unlike anything I'd ever read before. So I definitely wanted to continue on with the series, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was fantasy, sort of. It was just a hint of fantasy, a bit of magical realism, I suppose. And the book I read next was Ask the Passengers by A.S. King. And this book was really interesting. This book follows our main character Astrid, and she spends her time sitting out on the picnic table in her backyard, and she stares up at the sky and she talks to the people who are in the planes that fly over her house, and she asks them questions and she talks to them about life, and a lot of it she is asking them if it's okay that she's in love with a girl. Because this book is about a queer character. This is an LGBTQIA+ book, and it was really interesting, but I think that some of that aspect of it could have been more well done. I had a real issue with the fact that Astrid's friends, they really try to push her out of the closet, and I hate that. I think that that is just a terrible thing to perpetuate, that it's okay, because I feel like they don't have that many repercussions, but pushing someone out of the closet before they're ready is messed up. And it's wrong, and is completely the wrong way to be a support system. So that was probably my biggest issue with this book, was that I did not like how her friends treated her. But other than that, I really liked Astrid, and I thought that the family dynamic in this book was really, really interesting. It kind of reminded me of the family dynamic of The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. It was a dysfunctional family, but it was one where you really got to understand and see that dysfunction, and you got to not just have a main character go, I don't like my parents. There was a real way of delving into that and exploring family life that I really thought was interesting, and I really liked Astrid. So I liked this book, but because of the problems I had with it in the aspect of Astrid's friends, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Alright, next up, I read a chunker of a book, and that is because Janelle talked me into it. We wound up halfway through the month trading books that both of us had enjoyed the previous month. So I gave her my copy of Sharp Objects on my Kindle, and she gave me, technically it's my copy too, but she read it. She gave me Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. But this book, just to give a brief description, follows our main character Kelsey, and she has been living with these two people sort of on the outskirts of the kingdom, and on her 19th birthday, a bunch of Queen's guards come and retrieve her, and she is supposed to go and take her place on the throne, which is something she's been training for. But the thing is, there are so many death traps in her way that it is going to be a miracle if she makes it to the throne alive in the first place. So this book, for some reason, is a really dividing book. And I don't really know why. It seems like it's either people absolutely love it or people despise it actively. I was reading some of the bad reviews on this book, and to be honest with you, they made me kind of angry because I felt like some of it was just so wrong and such a weird way to interpret this book. So one thing you should know about this book is that it is a very odd form of fantasy. It actually takes place like hundreds of years from our future in a regressed society. Somehow, and the book is really vague on this, intentionally vague, it's really vague on how the world has regressed, but there will frequently be mentions of things that would not have existed in medieval times. So that's important to note, because apparently people were really infuriated that they weren't, like, informed of this. I thought that Kelsey was a fantastic main character. I thought that she was really interesting in terms of inner conflict, and I thought that she would make just a fantastic queen because she has such a big heart and she has such a mind for strategy, and I really, really loved this book, and I'm really glad that I bought it and that me and Janelle both read it and loved it, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read the other nonfiction book for my lit class, and that was 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff. This book is adorable. And you'll notice there is a bookstore on the cover, so book lovers who love to read about bookstores, I don't know how I hadn't heard about this book already. It was amazing. This book follows Helene Hanff, and she is a writer in New York City who can't find the kind of books that she wants to be buying, so she starts sending letters to a secondhand bookstore in England called Marks & Co., and she asks them for books, and her and the guy who she's sending letters to form this amazing friendship where they send letters back and forth and are friends for over 20 years. And this is a true story. This actually happened. It's a collection of her letters, and then the second half of this book is her diary. And every time I read this book, I was so excited to pick it back up again. It was so, so sweet and so adorable, and there was just so much in here to love if you're a lover of books, and Helene is so much fun. She's quirky and out there and hilarious, and I absolutely fell in love with her, and I wound up giving this book 4.5 out of 5 stars, but I absolutely love this book. I will definitely be getting myself my own copy of it, and yeah, so good. Next up, I read Days of Blood and Starlight, also by Laini Taylor. This is the second book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, and I guess I'm going to be pretty quick about wrapping this one up. It is the sequel to Daughter of Smoke and Bone, and our main character Karu continues her journey, and this book had a rough first half for me where I really couldn't get into it and I couldn't motivate myself to read it, and then the second half really brought it back around, and I thought it was really interesting, and the world building increased dramatically, and I really, really enjoyed that, and so I also gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Every Day by David Levithan. I have been so excited to read this book for a really long time. Back from when I bought the book on my Kindle over the summer, I knew that I wanted to get to this. This is my third David Levithan book this year, and I think that it definitely lived up to how much I've enjoyed the previous two. So this book follows our main character A, and every day A wakes up in the body of a new person, and A just has to kind of live their life, and they really kind of avoid making connections because that will make leaving even more difficult the next day, and this is just how A lives their life until one day A wakes up in the body of Justin and meets Justin's girlfriend Rhiannon and finally finds someone that they can connect with. So I'm very intentional about using they as a pronoun for A because on the back of the book it says he, and that is so misleading and unfair to how great this book was in terms of examining A as a character. A wakes up in a different body every day. They talk about the fact that they have a very different gender identity. Sometimes they feel more like a girl, sometimes they feel more like a boy, and sometimes that doesn't match up with the body that they are in at the moment. And, this book did such a good job of examining that, and examining the fact that A did not care about sexuality. Whoever A loved, so beautiful, and there was so much great background diversity as well that I really, really enjoyed. My only problem with this book, to be honest, was the love story, because from the beginning I was like, I don't know about this doesn't seem like something I want to root for, and by the end I was kind of like, I still feel the same as I did at the beginning. I feel like I haven't fallen in love with A and Rhiannon as a pair, but I know that there is a second book that's from Rhiannon's point of view that I don't have a lot of interest in reading because I didn't love Rhiannon, but I know that there is a third book in the works, and I would definitely be interested in reading that because this book ended on a very interesting note. But it was just really, really good. It was set up like a YA contemporary with a hint of fantasy, and I really liked it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, and I think, unfortunately, that what I've had to decide is that Neil Gaiman just isn't for me. This book follows a man who comes back to his childhood home to attend a funeral and is drawn to an old farm at the end of the lane that he used to visit, and while he is sitting at the duck pond behind this farmhouse, memories of this fantastical childhood adventure come back to him, and he just relives this experience that he had when he was 7 years old. People love this book, and it is a National Book Award winner in 2013, and so I was really excited about reading this book and getting into it, and I just don't think that Neil Gaiman's writing style is for me. This read like sort of an extended short story, and I just feel like, and I felt the same way with The Graveyard Book, which is the other Neil Gaiman book that I've read, that none of it is ever explained to the extent that I want it to be explained. I know it's odd, and it's supposed to be kind of fantasy and out there and has this really dreamy quality, but I feel like I never got explanations, and it's just something that I need when I'm reading. And I feel like I couldn't connect to the characters. Sometimes I was completely lost in terms of the story, and unfortunately, while I did really like some of the writing in this book, I really couldn't get into it overall. That makes me really sad because there were some moments of this book that I really liked. Clearly, I mean, I have multiple tabs along here, and I had some excellent lines and some great things to say about childhood, but I just couldn't quite get into the story, and so I gave this book a 3.25, 3.5 out of 5 stars. And finally, the last book that I read in the month of November was A Stranger Came Ashore by Molly Hunter. I wish I could have ended on a high note, but unfortunately I did not. A Stranger Came Ashore is just a sort of retelling of the myth of selkies. Selkies are creatures that look like seals, but they can shed their skins and come on land and look like humans. And I just wanted so much more from this book. It read definitely like a folktale, and it was interesting in that aspect, but what I've read so much about selkies is about selkie women, and that's kind of what I wanted going into this, and instead it was about a selkie man, and he was also the bad guy. And I know that that's where the tale comes from, but that's just not quite what I wanted when I wanted to read about selkies, and so I had issues with that. This book is also narrated by a 12-year-old boy, and so sometimes I felt figure it out, come on, get there, and it was really frustrating to read, despite the fact that it's like 130 pages long. I just couldn't get into this book at all. I didn't really like it, it makes me really, really sad, because I really wanted to love this book, but I wound up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. Alright, that's it. Those are the 9 books that I read in the month of November. Let me know down in comments what book you enjoyed most this month. And of course, thank you for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!